Okay, well, greetings everybody, and welcome to our NightVision Fireside chat here with Kevin Mandia. Kevin, thank you so much for coming. It's great to see you, and welcome on to our event.
It's good to be here, Dave. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, thank you, guys. Great seeing you. I wish we were in person so bad after all the years of seeing you. You're awful skinny looking, though. I'm wondering if COVID had a good effect on you that way.
I think I just can't find a good delivery for my pizza. That's about it. So
probably the case. Well, listen, everybody, I just want to say welcome. And I know it's just before the 4th of July. And I got just such an honor to have Kevin Mandia here with me. Obviously, the founder of Mandiant and the current CEO of FireEye and Mandiant. And a lot of news on that front we'll get to in a little while. But Kevin, what an amazing, amazing career you've had. And you're one of the people. I've been in this business almost 20 years, and I just want to say I'm so honored and thankful that you're on with me, and all the work you do, the mission you provide, the humility and honesty you've presented in a lot of face of a lot of issues. And for those who don't know it, I'm gonna embarrass Kevin just for a minute. You know, Kevin grew up in my home state of Pennsylvania, which is kind of cool, even though he's kind of more of a Steelers guy than an Eagles guy, I think, right?
I am.
But
my second team.
Your second team, yeah. Steelers are my second team too, so I'll throw that in. But went to the United States Air Force Academy. Ended up working for the Office of Special Investigations, where he got a lot of his career learning, and kind of born and raised, so to speak, for the job he does in the industry today. Obviously worked with a couple of companies prior, including Foundstone, which is irony for all of us, Kevin, because McAfee acquired Foundstone. Yep. And I was the CEO of McAfee and FireEye for a while too. And then you founded Mandiant in 2004. I want to talk about that. And obviously you have just an amazing, amazing career, thousands, if not tens of thousands of incident response breaches. Yep. Your understanding of this market's amazing. So I kind of want to start out, if we can. You and I have kind of had this weird front row seat to a movie, I like to call it. You know, we're in there, and I'm not sure if some days it's a horror show or it's a comedy show or what it is, but talk back just a little bit. What big kind of seminal moments stick out in your mind during that career? I kind of want to hear it from you. Like, what jumps out at you as like one of those like epiphanies?
You know, certain calls stick out. I mean, bottom line, Dave, is I get brought into incidents when this thing rings, you know, and you answer the phone, and some calls you just never get out of your head. You record them, you know, and I want to talk about the ones that probably wouldn't mind that I talk about them. But, you know, I do recall in 1998 going into FBI headquarters on a Wednesday and not leaving till Friday morning. And that was, at that time, I think we called the case Moonlight Maze. I think it started Midnight Maze, but it was that case. And I just never will forget seeing, you know, log files that had no explanation. And we had to figure out, you know, what was triggering all the events that we were seeing. We were seeing the impact and the aftermath, but we weren't seeing the first couple innings of a breach. And we had to figure out, where did we not have the visibility? How do we cover the gaps? And that was, you know, that was one of my first moments where I recognized this isn't an attractive nuisance we're responding to here. This is a real espionage campaign. They're surreptitious, they're smart, they're patient. And I saw things there, Dave, that I didn't see in some of the criminal cases that we responded to. Things like disciplined reconnaissance on a machine, where the attacker would do recursive directory listings of every file name on a machine, and he'd just leave and wait and come back 2 days later and grab the file, meaning they had an economy of movement that was unique and arguably respectable. You know, from a nerd to nerd language, I was observing something and respecting it. And then obviously over the years, and that was 1998, you know, getting a lot of calls, and back in 2006, 2007, every Friday night you get a phone call and it would be something like this, Dave. You know, they're robbing my bank. I'm not making this up. And it was back in the SQL injection days. SQL injection attack leads to credit card theft, leads to ATM card theft, leads to fraudulent withdrawals. And we were getting a case every single Friday, if not more than one, all on the inbound, you know, where I ended up getting, and I'm not making this up, I got tennis elbow by doing Friday afternoon phone calls all the time. I think the Sony breach, getting a phone call from Marshall Hamlin on the front line saying, hey, I think this was North Korea. Those are the kind of things, Dave, where you find yourself in a plane saying, hey, I got to go see this firsthand. I got to get there. And then more recently, things like the Colonial Pipeline, getting, that call, from our guys and recognizing, hey, this is a little different. There's a few more along the way. Obviously, the FireEye breach, our own. That was a wake-up call, that you don't always want to get. But anyway, those are some of the moments in my career where I recognized almost a shift change in the attacks. To me, Solar Sunrise, Moonlight Maze was showing you foreign espionage campaigns against, .mil against .mil, .gov against .gov, all the SQL injection attacks where, proved that wherever money goes, crime follows. The ransomware attacks of today, Dave, show that, the evolution of you can hack anonymously and get $50 million anonymously with cryptocurrency. Bottom line, a lot of different shift changes. I'd like to reverse that to you. When did you have that epiphany moment of, oh boy, things are different now?
Well, your history goes back a little further than me. When I first became CEO of McAfee, I just remember the quantity growth of our signatures that we would release every day. And back then, we were really excited to get daily DAT releases of our product. It used to be weekly or monthly. And then eventually companies like McAfee and Symantec, we got it down to daily. And during my time at McAfee, we went from, measured in, tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands to millions. And I think on my last days there, our DAT engine was in the 60 million range. So these are number of signatures that we were looking to block. So it was like giving me these epiphanies of just the quantity of viruses and worms and Trojans that were going on. And, it was like, wow, what a front row seat. And I'm going to embarrass you for a second because our paths crossed quite a bit later, when I became chairman with you at Mandia and then FireEye. But I'm really proud. I love this picture. I don't know if everybody can see it online there. I'll try to put it in. But this is you on the cover of Fortune magazine. Yeah. And I thought this was one of the most interesting epiphanies that I ever saw, which was sort of this government on government turned into government on commercial, but in massive sort of ways.
Right.
Talk a little bit of, I know you were really apprehensive to go, uncover, but in the end, it was important for the world to kind of hear what was going on. I'd love to hear it from your vantage point.
Well, we started Mandia in 2004 with this premise, former Air Force guy, security breaches are inevitable, don't be a headline kind of mentality where everybody has security incidents, but if you can get to them and respond to them before they have impact and consequence, that was kind of the goal of Mandia and Dave. Let's respond to every breach that matters and help close the security gap that exists with just frontline intelligence and frontline capability. So we started doing that. And right after we started in 2004, one of the defense industrial base organizations was compromised by the same Chinese cyber espionage folks that I saw when I was in the military. And that's when I think the light bulb went on, okay, the rules of engagement are changing. It looks like the DIB, Defense Industrial Base, is fair game. In 2005, that was the first time Mandia, all like 15 of us in the basement, responded to a breach at one of the 5 top defense industrial firms. And we pinpointed it was China. And then it was, the cavalry came. It was China all day long, compromising all the major defense industrial base players, hedge funds, law firms, anyone doing M&A in China. And the gloves just came off, and Mandia kind of got to catch that wave. And I think that Fortune magazine article is kind of the culmination of 7 years of relentless pursuit of trying to get Chinese cyber espionage actors off of corporate networks, primarily in the United States at that time. So, how we got on that, just a little side story. You never really want your picture on the cover of a magazine, unless it's Rolling Stone. I'd take that.
Take that.
Yeah, I'd take the Rolling Stone. But I didn't want to do the interview and I didn't want to be on the cover. But 2 things happened. One, our head of marketing at the time, a guy named Mike Evans, called me up and just said, "You're being selfish." And he was actually right. He's like, "You represent the company. This has nothing to do with you. The company's efforts are putting you on the cover, so do it." And I went, okay. And then the second thing, Dave, quite frankly, the only option for the cover that month, besides me, was I'm forgetting his name, the guy out of the NSA that went to Russia. And I can't believe I can't remember his name right now. So you'll remember the spy from Booz Allen.
Oh, yes. Yeah, you're not allowed to say the name. Yeah, I see.
You got it. No, I just literally, if we were on Jeopardy right now, I'd be like, oh, I can't remember the guy's name. But bottom line is there wasn't any other alternative, put on the cover. And it was a decent story. We caught Chinese cyber espionage actors. We had a lot of former military folks that wrote an incredible report on PLA Unit 61398. And we wanted to help the government with their information sharing efforts at that time. Mike Rogers out of Michigan was pushing for it. And we felt we could set an example of how to do that. So we did. And
that was, I believe that was the first time, the world psyche realized the enormity of cyberspace and cyber weaponry and sort of the totality of the problem coming. And I remember it like yesterday as well. And in fact, I went back and read it again a little bit before I came on here, February 18, 2013, and 141 companies. And you might remember, the reason I'm even here today after my whole CEO career, I'm now doing investing and advisory in my company called NightDragon, because NightDragon was one of the attacks that we named during that time period. It was Aurora, NightDragon, Shady Rats, and a bunch of Chinese APT intrusions that were like the straw that was breaking the camel's back a little bit for the psyche of the world. Like, wow, we got to fix this. We got to go, build companies. And I know you were on the front line of that. I'd love to hear you say, I don't know if you can, or what you can say a little bit more about Sony too. And I think you were even into buildings. I don't know what you can say there, but another one that was like, wow.
Well, there's no question that was a shift change. I think what I would say, I got the call from one of our frontline responders. Dave, I was at one of your offsites. We were out at the hotel in Half Moon Bay at an offsite, I believe, and it was right around Thanksgiving. And we just had frontline responders down there. And I got the phone call because I love it in my job when the frontline guys are working something, they know I'm interested, and they'll call me up and just say, hey, we got something here. This is, and Sony was the interesting one for that day. And I remember hearing a frontline leader say, hey, we think this was North Korea. And even I was incredulous, Dave. I remember thinking, there's no way North Korea would go this far. I just, no, it couldn't happen. So that one, you get on a plane and you go. You want to go see it firsthand and figure out what's really happening there. And I can just tell you, very few breaches have that kind of impact where, people can't work. They have to step outside of the building. It's almost it's a palpable physiological thing. You show up and you recognize that it's so not business as usual that you can feel it. And I've had that almost like an emergency room doctor, where you go in and you're sitting with people and you recognize it's physiologically impactful what they're going through. They're working around the clock on their breach. They feel like their own credibility is at risk. Their own, everybody just feels frustrated. And it's hard to win when you're on defense and you have something happen. Everybody lines up to condemn you for it. And it's a lonely planet. I've been saying this for 20 years. It's a lonely planet when you're victim. So I just remember going to Sony and just how palpable the impact of that breach was. You could feel it, you could see it. And breaches like that, where nothing works, like where the gate doesn't come up to let you in the property, or people can't buy their lunch because the machines have been shut down, or the lights are all off because everybody's out of the building. They've provided, and it's more just Sony, there's been other breaches like that, where you find yourself losing track of time, Dave, and you walk out of the building and you look around and go, wow, it's like, what time is it? And you look down, it's 4 a.m. when you're leaving the compromised victim network building, and you just don't even care about time. And you're just like, wow, this is one we're just going to work around the clock on. Sony to me was a shift change. I'd never seen anything. I'd never expected a nation at that juncture and at that time to commit that act against the private sector.
Well, I've always heard you talk about, there's capability and then there's motivation. And when motivation and capability get to the wrong level, bad things happen. Sony was an example of that. And I've had the honor of working side by side with you for many years with all these. And, it's such an honor to help people, but like you said, it's just frustrating too sometimes because like you're in the cleanup model versus, preventative model. I want you to talk about, if you could for a minute, something I'm incredibly, incredibly proud of you and my former alma mater, FireEye, and that was the breach that you went through. And for whatever you can say, from the human side of it,
sure.
Like when you learned about it, what you did, kind of anything like that, because now for the first time, or, you were kind of the victim on the other side.
Right. Yeah.
And, talk about that if you would.
Well, I can tell you, it materialized to me. I caught wind of it midweek, like a Tuesday or a Wednesday, but I got my first formal briefing on a Friday. And I can tell you, I hadn't thought a lot about it because we were working with Blackstone to close a deal at that time. And I remember on the Friday, we announced our Blackstone deal. And the next day we did our all hands, why we have an investment from Blackstone and all that. And it came, I just happened to finish my all hands, Dave, and I looked down at my phone. I'm like, oh, I got a security update in 5 minutes. I'll dial in for that. None the wiser, and everybody has incidents, and I love to be appraised of every damn one of them, whether they're minor, perceived as minor. Every once in a while we'd have credentials used against us that would work, and someone would try to get email or something like that, and we would detect it fast, and there was no consequences. In this briefing, very early on in it, I spent a lot of the 90s responding to foreign actors from Russia. And it started feeling like pattern recognition, Dave. I'd say 10 minutes into the briefing, I asked the question, I was hearing a lot of, here's what we're not sure of. So I finally just went, so what are we sure of? And the two things I heard at that time led me to conclude, oh, they've been in here before. Oh, they've probably been in a while. And I think this is the one I'm worried about. And so we held a board meeting the same day. And it may have been premature in a lot of people's minds, but I've always believed, I don't know why, bad news has to travel fast. Good news proves itself out. Nobody minds hearing good news late, but bad news, everybody minds not getting it right away. So we did brief the board. And I don't have a better way to describe that briefing other than I didn't know a lot. We were utterly at the onset of the investigation. I kind of summed it up. Brace for impact. This is really my day one. And I can tell in the middle of the briefing, I remember so many conversations I've had with CEOs where I would say to them, hey, the breach we're responding to, it's your day job now. And I remember giving myself my own speech. I mean, I literally in my head, I remember going, this is my job now. Don't get distracted by anything else. Responding to this breach is your job. How you're going to handle it is your job. And I do believe that. I think CEOs have to own the moment when there's a problem like that, whether it's a security breach or some other moment. And I'm not, a big fan of farming out the responsibility to 28 board members and stuff like that. I think the CEO's got to own it. But I can tell you early onset, I just wanted to go home on a Friday afternoon. And I could tell from the team, our frontline responders, Dave, that they knew this could turn into what it turned into, that it was the Russian SVR that had hacked us.
And by the way, thank you for that story. And by the way, I want to come to SolarWinds in just a second, but it reminds me of just the lesson I learned for a second, Kevin, and why I was so proud of you. Your honesty and humility and hard work, and I always call them the 3 H's, are like such good leadership. In adversity, you learn about leadership. And I had one of those days, and a lot of people know about this. April 21st, 2010, Kevin, I'll remember it like it was yesterday. I wake up that morning, I got a call like you did. And McAfee at the time, as a CEO, we had sent out a faulty DAT release, like by accident. We were working really hard the night before. There was a particular nasty intrusion that affected, memory of the Microsoft devices, and our QA wasn't great. And within 16 minutes, we sort of wiped out, not sort of, but we wiped out 1,672 companies. Remember it like it's yesterday. In 16 minutes, of course, we tried to roll back the DAT. We did, but companies were down for days on end. And I did something that day that I will never forget as a leader. Was I admitted it was my fault, and I would do everything in my power to try to help everybody who was there. And we deployed thousands of employees. We went out of our way to try to recover and fix it. And one of those companies at that time was Intel Corporation, ironically, who later bought McAfee. But we deployed it, and a funny thing happens is empathy and sympathy of honesty and hard work and humility in those moments. And it turned out to be a positive for McAfee. And I know it turned out to be a positive for you, Kevin, at FireEye too. So thank you for that and the community that it worked in.
Yeah. And it's definitely not easy, Dave. Right away, we got the share, we went live December 8th. One of the most pleasurable moments of my career was that, at the time, we didn't know about the SolarWinds implant when we went public, but what we did know is we had to go public because we had lost our red team tools, and we didn't have any doubt about that. And we didn't want to make an average hacker great. So we started getting YAR rules made for our tools, getting it out to everybody we could, both in the government, in other organizations, in private sector security companies. Microsoft had it. And I remember going into the board meeting, and there was, the legal perspective was we did not have a legal reason to disclose, which, by the way, surprises me. But I didn't even care. And I remember thinking, we're going live. And I had all my prepared notes to compel the board to go live. Our board was unanimous to go live in like 5 minutes. It was the most pleasurable board meeting I ever had, because I was bracing for that dialogue. And by the way, it would have been fair, very fair, to have good academic debate about the decision. But for me, as a security company, you don't have a choice. And there's a lot of reasons why. It's not just to safeguard customers, but I think I knew who was behind it. And you don't want them to have any chips. You don't want them to have collateral to manipulate you. You're better off just saying, here's what they did, period, and just getting it out there so they don't have the control, they don't have the posturing. And so there's a lot of things. But what I really liked about Team FireEye is just, let's get out, let's go, let's tell everyone. And at the time that we did it, definitely still fog of war. We did not know how they broke in. And you always have that in the back of your mind, boy, I hope someone didn't do something, bad, and finding the implant, we found it a few days later, did help me understand, this was way beyond FireEye. The minute we found the SolarWinds implant, we recognized the seriousness that the campaign probably was.
In fact, Kevin, I printed something out just because I thought it was very telling of something you wrote in the blog that you released on December 8th. And it just talked about, based on my 25 years in cybersecurity responding to incidents, I've concluded we're witnessing an attack by a nation with top tier offensive capabilities. This attack is different from tens of thousands of others. Talk about that, because here's another seminal moment that just happened, right? And, here we are in this almost asymmetric theater now where the nation state's power is so great against companies like a SolarWinds or even against the FireEye. And we're living in that world today. And anything you could talk about that, just kind of the state of the threat. What you learned in SolarWinds.
Well, for a lot of the folks watching this, they'll be like, Mandia, you always are quoted as saying, it was a nation state that did it. Believe it or not, every time we say that, we pretty much know it. And so we didn't just service that up to help customers out. We believe it when we say it. To me, Anthem was compromised by a nation. And I was a little upset that the government never did attribution to help Anthem out. They had a great security team they were trying. Same with Sony. Sony had great security talent. And nobody deserves to have this happen to them. And I was always surprised at the folks that said, oh, they have bad security. How could they let this happen? Over time, all of us are going to have security incidents, especially with no risk or repercussions. But in regards, real quickly, Dave, I'll just give 2 out of the 8 reasons why I said we were attacked by a nation at FireEye. By the time December 8th rolls around, we're pretty good at incident response. We know what we're doing. Hacking us is like getting in the battle of the bands against the Beatles. We're going to do okay in this competition. And as we're doing our forensics, I learned the following. Not one failed login by bad guy using a valid user ID and passphrase every time. But here's where it gets interesting. They use the exact right IDs for the right systems. That's called discipline. That's operational security as well, because they're matching the exact right account to the machines they're accessing. Every time they got into our network with valid credentials, they were using an IP address that we found wasn't used in any other breach anywhere. And we worked with our partners in the government to see if that was the case. The whole infrastructure used to compromise FireEye was only used to compromise FireEye. And that goes with many of the other victims of the SolarWinds implant as well. The infrastructure used to compromise each victim was in the same country as the victim organization, and it was an unshared infrastructure. So Dave, just those two alone, they did the discipline to always use the right account to log in, and they would log in as users, regular users, to get what they need. That's doing your homework. And they never reused an IP address. That means there's just no pattern there when it comes to IP or domain. They were just all over the place, but from the host nation. So, and there was about 6 other reasons where I was pretty darn sure, in my opinion, it was the SVR, probably within the first 24 hours of our response. In regards to your question on kind of where's it going, is that, you know, well, I can tell you, we better have risks or repercussions to the actors. You're looking at the ransomware stuff, Dave, and it's just, we're all playing goalie, and we could be great at goal, but every once in a while, even a sloppy kick gets in the net. You know, even an average player can score a goal if they get enough attempts. And right now, it's at least in Russia, there's just unlimited opportunity to attack the West, quite frankly, nonstop. Keep shooting the puck at the goal till it gets in. And a lot of the breaches people read about, the security was good. And there was like 2 or 3 events that occurred that were suboptimal that actually, it was like almost a perfect storm that led to the breach. Everybody's going to have a day like that. So I would tell you this, you're seeing the escalation because so much money can be made. And at the same time frame, there's just no risks or repercussions to the actors. So I think, you know, I read an Interpol report was sent to me probably January of this year. And it said, and I don't know all the categories that were included in this, but it said that more money is being made by cybercrime than any other crime. And I kept thinking, well, I bet narcotics has it beat, but there's probably billions of dollars being made by doing these attacks. And that's a lot of money. So bottom line, until there's risks or repercussions, the criminal attacks are going to continue. And in regards to the espionage, Dave, much more complex problem to solve. That's an issue I don't think we'll have international rules for.
Yeah, I can't agree more, Kevin. You know, in all my time, you know, not as extensive doing IR work, but watching this from a front row seat too. You know, one of the phenomenons, I talk about these 3 S's that these nation states have, kind of this triad almost that nation states have created, where they're using their most sophisticated tools, you know, like on a FireEye or, you know, the SolarWinds breach, but they're also using 2 other vectors of the triad, what I call shell organizations and sheltered organizations, where it's almost looking the other way while ransomware attacks are occurring, or they're actually creating shell organizations of the government. And we watched that over the last years as well. When you start to put directly sourced shell companies, sheltered companies, you put that into a pot, and all of a sudden a nation state like Russia's doing it. And then you start to look at what other nation states are going to replicate that. And our threat landscape continues to rise in ways that, you know, is worrisome. Real quick with you, I want to spend just 5 or 10 minutes. I want to chat about threats that are coming for a minute, because SolarWinds was, in my mind, you know, one of those, again, seminal moments, like, wow, all of a sudden we're watching supply chain get breached in software in a way that, you know, is worrisome. You know, let's go back and forth if we could, 1 minute or 2 minutes each. You know, what threat is worrying you the most? Maybe it is supply chain, I don't know, but what one's coming that worries you most?
Well, so I can tell you what it aggravates me the most. It's deep fakes. I think that we as a nation we abide by laws, and when we do offense, you know, we kind of corral and operate with restraint. And I feel we'll do the same thing in information operations. And I think it's just human nature, Dave. Nobody likes to be lied to, period. And yet I think we have a whole generation that's going to face information that will look real, sound real, smell real, taste real, and be fake. So I am worried about information operations, and that's sort of tangential to the whole hacking thing, but it's going to change the hearts and minds of people and manipulate us in ways that are hard to prevent. I can tell you this, you can watch a deep fake, know it's fake, and still you can't shake it. You can't get it out of your head and go, okay, that was fake, but I think that guy's a dirtbag now, you know, like you can't shake your perception. I think we're going to be a country that other nations will take advantage of. And so I am most worried about the information operations, and I don't believe over time there'll be easy ways to detect a deep fake.
Yeah, I can't agree more, Kevin. That's something I've talked about a lot is, information warfare age that we're getting into, disinformation, manipulated information, deep fakes like you're talking about, the lack of defense we have against that, because now we have these social platforms and these platforms of sharing, which are viral to billions of people in sometimes seconds and minutes. And, how do you discern real information from fake information? What do we do to guard against that? What kind of crisis communications do we create? Yes. And the whole idea of data poisoning and information poisoning is, something real. What do you have any thoughts about how we solve that? Like what do we have to do?
Yeah. So I guess when you said, what are you most worried about? It's trust. Can we trust what we see? Can we trust what we read? Can we trust the data that are in our systems? You never want to see the offense start changing the data, especially the most modern countries that are on offense, Dave. I've always felt it's breaking the rules of the playground. Since we don't have written rules of engagement for cyber espionage, I do not know of, I think I have barely one exception, a modern nation, a China, Russia, or US, where they actively changed information so you couldn't trust it. I think that's like a taboo for now. And I am worried about the day it's no longer taboo, it becomes the norm. We will change data and make it unreliable if we get to it. So I think my first bullet point was trust. What can be done about it? Down that we could do a whole 500-page book on. But you want the authenticity of documents, so people can look at lots of different technologies to do that. And I can tell you this, a big thing will be identity management. A lot of what enables cyber criminals and cyber espionage is actually the anonymity provided that. I think it would be very valuable for everybody to recognize what sources of information on social media are from anonymous sources versus non-anonymous. There's a big difference. And I recognize anonymity is a form of privacy and we need it for whistleblowers. But anonymity is exactly what criminals and espionage requires to be successful. So there is a trade-off there, but I am a believer that over time, we're going to have to actually look at the issues of trust and identity and say, here's the world of trusted identities, and here's the Wild West of anonymous identities. And you'll pick for yourself what to trust, what to believe. On your own systems, Dave, shoot, you and I could probably talk for hours on how do you secure a network,
Right. The one that's keeping me up at night right now, or if it's an analogy, or scares me the most too at the moment, is our supply chain.
Yeah.
I watched during the crises that we had in the pandemic and economic crisis has really created, like, all of a sudden you realize, as the markets flex up or down, how important the supply chain is, how vulnerable the supply chain, how global the supply chain has become, and ultimately creating vulnerabilities. SolarWinds was an example of that supply chain being breached, but software is just one of many complex supply chains, hardware and vulnerabilities that could be put in backdoors of hardware, everything from our thermostat to the thermometer in your fish tank, could get breached. And when you start to look at that supply chain, how do we understand risk of that? And you and I are involved with one or two companies there, but that one, I think we got to solve risk intelligence, the supply chain, management of that, et cetera.
Well, you bring up a good point, because if you learn anything from SolarWinds, supply chain is fair game for espionage, period. So it's going to happen again. And what you're recognizing is the bigs have to help defend the smalls. There's just the poverty line to some extent in cybersecurity, where big companies with tons of resources have these security programs, but a lot of the supply chain in some industries are a lot smaller and they don't even have security proficiency. So I hear you there. All the supply, and we're working with a ton of companies, Dave, where they're trying to figure out what's in our supply chain. Who are the top 10 partners that we really need to share our risk profile and make sure that contractually we know what they're up to and they're meeting our bar for cyber risk. And by the way, your supply chain security is A, ongoing effort. B, it takes a lot of companies like a year to figure out their supply chain. What I learned the hard way was stop asking your business line owners, hey, who are our key suppliers? You actually go straight to your CFO. Who are we paying? That was the only way we could find who we actually had in our supply chain. And even at FireEye, with just, like 3,500 employees, we had over 1,000 partners that we were paying and relying on for software and services. So even our supply chain for, a mid-sized company was enormous, Dave. So I agree with you there. It will be hard to secure the supply chain. And what I'm witnessing in some industries like the defense industrial base is the Lockheeds, the Raytheons, the General Dynamics, the bigs are kind of taking on the responsibility to help their partners get more secure. So it's a tough challenge.
Yeah, and by the way, it goes deeper than just the 1,000 companies you directly procure from. Is what they procure from and what they procure from, and you get a long line. I know being on the board of Delta Airlines and watching what we went through with the airline and sharing safety and security, and just suddenly like, where do we get a mask? How do we get a defogger? Where do we go? And all of a sudden the borders all changed. And it was just a really interesting time to realize how big that risk was. I want to pivot if I can, Kevin, because we're getting questions online, and I want to give, for those who are online, if you guys want to ask Kevin or I a question, feel free to type it in here. But I want to hear a little bit. I know you just did some pretty exciting things with FireEye and Mandiant, and your vision of Mandiant is amazing. I had a chance to listen in on the analyst call, and the Mandiant advantage and the power of what you're building is incredible. And I always tell everybody this, when I think about what company has the closest association with trust, has the closest association with managing risk, managing threats, it's your company, Kevin, and congratulations building it. But spend a couple minutes, if you would, for everybody. Where are you going with Mandiant? What do you see? What's the Mandiant advantage mean?
Right.
And tell everybody.
Yeah, and so with Mandiant, what we've done is we've taken our control products, FireEye, and we are selling them to Symphony Technology. And the reason we're doing that is we want Mandiant to be controls agnostic. And one of the things, Dave, that I get all the time when working with folks is basically they feel like, I wish I had a Mandiant expert looking at every event we've got, everything. I wish we had Mandiant hunting on our networks. I believe all software is automating human process. And what we're trying to do with Mandiant Advantage is take all our intel and all our expertise and automate it with AI and machine learning models. We believe we can automate the best security experts, so that we can kind of ride sidecar to a data repository of security events and rapidly triage, you have a problem, yes or no. So the Mandiant Advantage is our efforts, and it'll always be ongoing, but we have our teams using it, and it's going to be our knowledge automated by machines to answer two questions. Am I currently compromised? Could I be currently compromised? We believe in validation. And you used to always say, Dave, how do you show value during times of peace? And it's hard. Like if antivirus never triggers, people are wondering, well, are we just not getting attacked, or are we missing something? So, and that's every defense countermeasure. So what we believe with Mandiant Advantage is we've infused our intel. We give you a heads up display of everything we know, everything open source knows. And at the same time frame, we use models to help you scale your experts, because we're putting all our expertise into it. But at the end of the day, if you're saying, hey, we're not compromised and we're not being attacked, right in the same experience, Dave, you can validate. And I do believe the only way to have unvarnished truth about how good your security program is live fire drills. Shoot real bullets at the vest. Did you stop it or not? And there's nothing wrong if you don't stop attacks. It's the opportunity for you to refine your defense posture and re-instrument your controls to stop it. So Mandiant Advantage is literally, we're going to be sidecar to the SIM or data repository, and it's like having 1,000 Mandiant experts added to your team. That's simple.
I love it, Kevin. I think, since my entire time being in security, I always believe that one day we're going to get to this security as a service. And, eventually it's going to be like water or heat that we get in our house or our corporation. And your vision of creating a security as service that's scalable and automates all this amazing human intelligence that you have into empowerment for others. As people come up with that, I think your vision is a beautiful one. And little do a lot of people know how big Mandiant is. I mean, you can tell them all, but I wrote it down here: 424 million in the last 12 months, growing 20+%. I think Mandiant's, a real force in the future. So pretty cool. Let's take a question or two if we can, Kevin, online. One of them I thought that came in is right in your wheelhouse, and I'd be curious how you could respond to it. Is the area of active defense or offense, or where's the line defense to offense? How do you see that philosophically?
So Dave, I've been thinking about this literally since the 1990s. It's first off, it's a great idea if you're in the government to do it, or if you're deputized from the government to do it. But the challenge will always be that you can change doctrine and escalate something if you arbitrarily have what I call offensive operations in cyber. In other words, if I'm translating the question right, Dave, I don't believe in hacking back as a private sector. I don't believe in like having documents that can make a system crash when people steal them and try to view them on their system. So I believe that the challenge we would have is, let's say, APT Group 28, the Russian GRU breaks in. If a company responds to that break-in in a means that escalates the tensions, you're letting a private company set the doctrine for our nation. And I don't think that's the right thing to do. If you have air as a domain, land, sea as domains, and cyber as a domain, I think you leave it to the government or those deputized by the government to escalate activities in those domains.
But keep pulling on that thread, Kevin, because ultimately my belief is public and private sector working together as a village. It takes a village analogy is what's needed. And you've been an amazing example of that. And I have been too in my career, was like, just how do we work together, observing privacy, but enhancing security. And I know, through the Colonial Pipeline and some of the other ransomware breaches, we're starting to figure out ways to cooperate. Like, how do we get better public-private? What do we have to do?
So a couple of things. So Dave, you're talking about let's respond as a nation collectively or as a group of nations collectively, right? Every nation hates ransomware. And what's interesting, and I know you believe in the marketing of three, so I'll give you three things that we need to do to respond to criminal activity at the national level. That means private and government together. You can't just have the government say, hey, we're going to legislate that you can't pay the ransom, because all that does is puts the burden of stopping the problem on the private sector alone. It's got to go hand in hand with something else. If they outlaw paying ransoms for those sort of activities like ransomware, make their risk and repercussions to the actors. They go hand in hand. So I think as a nation, the policy needs to focus on three things. A, risks and repercussions to the actors that commit criminal acts on the internet, or risks or repercussions to the nations that harbor them. Second, fine, then outlaw the payment of it if you want to, but I'm certain you're going to have a carve out, because when a hospital gets compromised, it's a heck of a lot easier to decrypt stuff in 3 hours than 25 days. So you got to really think about risk versus rewards there. And it's a tough thing to legislate. It sounds great in the first inning, second inning of thought, you start worrying about it. And the third thing is you're going to have to up level the blocking and tackling of security, or the hygiene of security across the nation. So I do know this, with the National Cyber Director, Dave, with Chris Inglis doing that, we now have a cabinet level person. We can start responding as a nation. And I think that position, for the first time ever, we can also help victim companies and insurance companies by having that position potentially be the position that labels an attack. They don't have to put pie in the face with exact attribution, but they could say the attack that brought down this pipeline or brought down this company was a nation state attack. Just that category alone can help in lawsuits, help in insurance claims, and help the nation respond with more of an accord on the desired outcomes. So we can do a lot more things better together. And I can tell you, with Inglis in the role, Jen Easterly in the role, and Newberry in the roles that they have, the private sector and the government is drawing closer and having a national response to the criminal acts happening.
Yeah, I love what you're saying, and I believe in it wholeheartedly. For all my time running companies and here with NightDragon as well, anything we can do to enhance public-private partnership, I want to do. And you're right, I'm really looking forward to Chris and Jen being in their roles, as well as the rest of the team, and Newberger, great teams in place. Something that I'd seen, and I'd be curious on your comments, there was this epiphany I had on the positive side, and I don't know if you remember this, but we had a peace treaty at one point for a small period of time. President Obama was able to put in place after some of the big reports you had put out, a peace treaty with China, and ultimately that at least calmed things down for a little while. And I'm hoping and praying in some ways that we can arrive at some Geneva Convention kind of thing about what can be attacked, what can't be, rules of the road. And, what do we have to do to put this peace treaty back in place? We had it once.
Right.
You're right. It's those companies and countries can, attack us. We're more vulnerable. But sooner or later, whenever mankind, I always say, finds a new domain conflict over it. Here we are conflicting over the cyber domain. How do we get a peace treaty? What do we have to do?
Yes. Well, Dave, it was Senator King. I was doing something with him 2 days ago, and he said something that was exactly right. I kept saying it's a national problem. It's a societal problem in reality. And so it's going to take, and this is the good news, you and I are techies, and we're going to try to solve the problem of tech and process. The reality is it's going to take diplomacy. You're going to have to get the nations that want to have rules and abide by rules collectively punishing and sanctioning those countries that don't abide by those rules. That's simple. And the rules can be drafted, especially for criminal acts. And then you're just going to have to hold those nations accountable. I think you have to behave a certain way to be part of a global economy. I think harboring ransomware actors, making billions of dollars off the backs of people that are working hard and putting people in harm's way when you do it is just wrong, and it should be punished. So I think it's going to take an international body, an international collection, and you're going to see geopolitical alignment, similar to like a NATO treaty. You're going to see cybersecurity that way. And whether the governments do it or not, the private sector is already sort of doing it. There are a whole bunch of companies that just block every IP address from certain nations. Over time, through technology, companies will change the internet experience that happens for citizens in, let's say, Russia, based on the lack of trust of the activities that come out of that nation. It will happen naturally, but I think it's more fair for everybody and for society if the governments actually have the dialogue, band together, make the rules, and then start holding people accountable. It can be done.
It can be done. I really do believe that. And I think it's going to take, as you said, governments working together, people, society working together, unfortunately, it takes sometimes catastrophes or disasters or attacks in cyber to make everybody aware of it, but we've had a lot of them. So it's soon time to go. Hey, let's end it on a kind of a fun note, because we're almost at the end if we can.
Yeah. And we haven't been fun.
It's almost 4th of July weekend here, and I'm thankful that you've joined. Real quick, do you do anything fun for the 4th of July?
Just try not to get injured, Dave. I've got a couple of older brothers coming into town. We'll challenge each other on a few things. The athletics are down a few notches, and we're just going to try to avoid the hospital. So, but there'll be a few challenges. There'll be a vicious game of cornhole. Maybe, we'll go to Top Golf and see who can drive the ball 150 yards. It used to be 300, right? Now it's like, can you get it over the 150 mark? So yeah, we'll do a few things that'll leave me with a sore elbow. But how about you?
Same. Every time I face my son now and daughters as they've grown, they're all over age 21 now. I live in fear when they say, let's go play pickup basketball or let's throw the football around. And I'm with you. Cornhole seems safer, or a game of pool or something nice, or go play golf. So I'm with you, Kevin. Listen, you're an amazing human. I'm thankful to have you here today, and thank you for all the service and work you do for not just this country but the whole world. And best of luck to you with Mandiant and the future. And hope to see you around. Hopefully, you go to Black Hat if you can, and we'll all see you there.
All right, take care, Dave. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Take care, everybody. Appreciate it. Have a great weekend, 4th of July weekend. Bye. Bye, Kevin.